On that. So I won't take up too much of your time. Walter wanted to contact me quite a while ago, and I've been a proponent of the smart meters. And my first opposition for smart meters was no choice. That's the first opposition I had. Again, tomorrow is Remembrance Day. We're honoring people who fought for freedoms, and we've lost this freedom. So that's my first problem with the smart meters. So I'm going to give you a little quick trip when I went down to UBCM. Walter contacted me and said, well, you know, Mike, this is being sponsored by BC Hydro. Kind of not a good thing to go to. And I said, well, Walter, you know, I'm not going to be that silly. I'm going to talk to a lot of people. So every day I was there, I talked to a lot of people, went to a lot of things. So the first person I talked to was somebody from the BC Utilities Commission. This is where I have a second problem. Anytime something like this happens in the province, this goes through BC Utilities Commission. BC Utilities Commission was bypassed because this is deemed green energy. So anything that's deemed green energy is automatically bypassed by BCUC. That's a problem. We put BCUC in this position to make sure these kind of things don't happen. So then we went to a symposium put on by Hydro, kind of like this, and they had some questions, and I gave Walter the book. And I got up and I asked some questions. And when I set up smart meter, or not smart meters, but when I set up wireless devices at the forestry, I always made sure that I had kept my radius within 50 to 75 feet. These devices that are going to be collecting your information from your smart meters, and usually when I set people up like this stuff, you usually have 50 of these things responding. So I asked the vice president, how many of these meters will be responding to this one collection point? He said 2,000. So 2,000 of these things are going to be reporting to, let's say Walter's the collection area. John is the first house. John sends. Now he's got 1,999 houses behind him, all sending at the same time. So I said, this is a problem. Well, he said, well, they won't be sending it all at the same time. It'll be staggered. So in other words, it will be full time that this happens. So now, just for a moment, Merritt is probably going to be looking at about 5 of these collection points. A city of 100,000 is going to be looking at, you know, a city of 1 million is going to be looking at 500 of these things. So then I asked him, well, is the whole system going to be wireless? So in the world of wireless, you collect. Walter's the collection point. Once Walter gets that information, he has to do something with it. It has to go to a thing called an RNC, and that's your main radio area. That holds on to everything, and then it sends it to the mothership or the silo. So I asked him, is this all going to be wireless? He said, no, no, no. We're going to pick 3 different ways. We're going to go twisted pair, which is cable. We're going to go, if we can't go twisted pair, we're going to go satellite. And in the worst case, we're going to be using wireless transmission through cell phone towers. So you already know right off the bat, the satellite thing is going to happen because it's very expensive. A lot of twisted pair stuff probably will happen, but there's going to be a lot of wireless as well. So the question that I had is then, the day later I talked to the executive vice president, I asked him the same question. And he said, oh no, no, we're going to be all twisted pair. So again, they're not exactly sure how these things are going to go. And another analogy that I have to put out here, when I was a kid, I played hockey in an arena up in a place called Stewart, BC. And that entire arena at the time was covered with fiberglass asbestos insulation because it was fantastic, it was cheap. But now we find out that asbestos probably was the worst thing you could be exposed to. But at that time, nobody knew. For myself, I don't want to be a guinea pig for this kind of stuff. I also asked about wired meters. And they said, well, and you've heard, the wired meters are more expensive. That's incorrect. Anything that's wireless is more expensive because you have a radio inside it. That's what you're paying for, is the radio. So that's incorrect. And I also pointed out, he said, well, it would cost us a lot of money to put the wire in. And I said, well, am I not right here? But when I look at my meter, and I look at the pole, and I look at the telephone pole, there's already a wire coming to it. So what's the problem here? Well, it's, you know, we can't, there's no such thing as a wired meter. Well, we know that's incorrect. We know that it's in Ontario, we know it's in the States. So there's a lot of rhetoric that goes on. Now, council, when we went down to UBCM, we voted for a moratorium, and I have to tell you, it was disappointing. For 2 days, we tried to get this thing on the floor, and we were defeated every single time. We wanted to put it forward as an emergency measure. One of the reasons that it happened, and I'm not blaming these communities, but there's a lot of communities in BC that do not use BC Hydro as their power provider. They use Fortis. Fortis is not going to wireless meters. So they thought, no sense for us to get involved, so we're just simply going to vote no. So 2 minutes before the session ended on Friday, we passed this moratorium. We never even got a chance to debate it. It was very depressing. The night before, Rich Coleman basically said, we don't care what these UBCM guys say, we're going to go ahead and do it anyways. But one thing I have to tell you is, we came back and we asked, Walter wrote a letter. He warned me he was going to write a letter and trash us councillors, and that's fine. I said, go ahead. But we voted not for a moratorium, but we voted to speak to BC Hydro one more time. And you have to understand this. And the reason we've done that is because when you're involved with this kind of stuff, when we went down to UBCM, it was a stone wall, absolutely nothing. Now you start to see things happening. President of BC Hydro resigns, wants to work with Neon for Jimmy Pattison. How do you go from the top job to doing neon signs? But anyways, Christy Clark basically said, absolutely not. Now she's willing to talk. Dag Sherman is coming here on the 21st of this month to talk to whatever council is sitting. He's bringing some advisors. He knows we're on the verge of moratorium, and he knows it. So he wants to come forward with some ideas. My idea is going to be the same one that I've always said. We have to have a choice. And I said to the Premier, when we sat in the office, we got to have 15 minutes with groups, with ministers and premiers, and I said to the Premier, had you offered a wireless option, we wouldn't even, none of this would be happening. And the wireless option, the wired option is available. But this deal was done 3 years ago. These meters were bought 3 years ago. The smart grid is going to come, and the smart grid is a good thing because BC Hydro is so far behind in their technology. Smart grid is going to happen. But the point of the matter is we have to be the tip of the sword. We have to be the solution to the problem. We have to work and say, look, we're all willing to go to a meter of some sort, but we have to have a choice of what we want. I had a lady in Prince George call me, and I think she knows Walter as well, and she was very concerned. And she called me because her council basically didn't want anything to do with her. And we talked quite a bit, and she has a diagnosed problem of actual being allergic to these waves. It's diagnosed, she's got letters. So she's done everything to make sure she has no wireless in her house at all. She comes home, there's a wireless meter on her house. So she's a little panicky. She phones me, we talk about it a little bit. So when I was down at UBCM, on the floor, I asked the hydro executives, here's this lady, what are her options? She has a condition. Well, he says to me, she can put a lead plate right where the meter is on her house. Well, sure, and then we could cover it in asbestos just to make it that much better. So that's one of the theories, put a lead plate. So I said, well, that's not going to work for her. That's not going to work for anybody because lead is not a good thing to have. Well, he said, she can then move her meter. She can move her meter on a pole out to her house. And he said, if she's that stupid, right in open, everything. I couldn't believe it. I said, what? He said, if she wants to move the meter at her own cost, if she's that stupid. So this is the kind of mindset you have. And you have every right to keep these people off your property. You do. It's your property. It's private. You simply, they have to knock on your door and say, I'm putting a meter on. And you can simply say, no, you're not today. But you have to understand that the city is aware of what's going on, and we are looking at moratorium. The reason we didn't pass it is because people wanted more information before we passed it, and that's what's coming. But the city is well aware of this, and we're working towards what we can work towards for you.
How is the information coming?
What do you mean?
How is the information going to be coming from the city to the citizens that don't know all about this?
Well, basically, once that happens, again, it'll be the council that's sitting of the day. Then it will be released. We're trying to make this a public meeting.
In what format will it be released? Like,
I don't know yet. I honestly don't know. Basically, we've let them know unless there's something happening, it'll be a full moratorium. Now, again, a full moratorium means you can't put meters in here, but kind of right now they'll do what they want. And that's where we have to stop it.
Mike, I was just, when you talk about, okay, now Christy Clark's willing to talk, but they're rushing and putting these in. And what I think is going to happen is that either through courts or whatever, they're going to have to undo this. And it's still going to be landing on our expense. And those people up there are still going to get their money. That's what it's all about. So
you're right. And again, it's all about, there's a lot of money to be lost by a lot of people here.
No matter what way it comes out, the bill is still going to be on our
That's correct.
And it's
the only reason that I honestly believe, and don't quote me on this, is the reason there's a little bit of bendability is because of the talk of the HST style referendum. All they need is 280,000 signatures. And that's not going to be too hard to get. So now they realize what's happening is people are taking a stand now.
Why are they rushing with getting them all in so quickly?
I don't know the aspects of the deal. I'm assuming there has been a backroom deal going on for 3 years.
They want them installed, then they get all of them.
There's a lot of money there's a lot of powerful people that stand to lose some money. I'm positive of it. So this is why it's being rushed in. I'm positive of it.
May I? It's getting.
Yes, thanks very much.